Good Tuesday afternoon, and thanks for joining us on Kare 11 News Now. I'm Lauren Lemanchek. We're starting with breaking news this afternoon. This is a look near San Jose, California, where authorities are investigating a shooting involving agents from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Officials on the ground say no local authorities were involved in the incident and that a suspect was transferred to a local hospital. This story will be developing all day. We'll update you when we know anything new. Developing right now, the United States struck several targets on Iran's Kare Island. All of these strikes, according to U.S. officials, were from the air, no troops on the ground. Kare Island is Iran's main oil export terminal and serves as the backbone for the Iranian government's revenue. Right now, the president is warning Iran to strike a deal to end the conflict, or the U.S. will bomb Iran's bridges and power plants. NBC's Matt Bradley is in Tel Aviv.
Well, the whole Middle East and really the whole world is waiting on this deadline coming up in a couple of hours when President Trump says he will target Iranian civilian infrastructure, particularly energy sites, if Iran continues to refuse to open the Strait of Hormuz, that vital waterway that carries about 20% of the world's energy needs. Now, as far as negotiations are concerned, the Iranians have rejected the latest American ceasefire proposal, saying they don't want a ceasefire for 45 days as proposed by this idea that came through the Pakistanis. Instead, the Iranians say they want a complete end to the Israeli and American aggression. And in previous responses, they've said they want to maintain their sovereignty, as they call it, over the Strait of Hormuz. Now, this is a situation that is still going on. We don't know exactly what President Trump is going to do. He doubled down on his threats against Iran in just the past 24 hours. The Iranians seem to be laughing off these constant ultimatums because this is not the first time that President Trump has made threats to Iran and not followed through. By my count, this is the 5th time that the president has moved this date, this time, for that exact reason, for that exact purpose of destroying Iran's civilian infrastructure. Now, the point is here, too, a lot of people throughout the world are criticizing the president, saying that this is expressly a threat to commit a war crime, that attacking civilian infrastructure has been considered a war crime. For example, when Russia did it in Ukraine, and this time the president is threatening to do just that again. Matt Bradley, NBC News, Tel Aviv.
Happening right now, efforts are underway to help save Hennepin County Medical Center. Hennepin County Commissioner Jeffrey Lundy says the board was asked to pass a local resolution at today's meeting that would clear the way for legislation at the state level to repurpose an existing sales tax and create a stable funding source for HCMC. To prevent closure, the proposal centers on the so-called ballpark tax originally used to fund Target Field. The bill would increase Hennepin County's existing sales tax to 1%, generating about $340 million per year for HCMC. As of now, the hospital projects up to $50 million in losses this year and as much as $1.7 billion over the next decade. Hospital leaders warn without this funding, it could start to close in just a few months and cause a domino effect in other hospital systems.
The 1 to 2 hours you might feel at another hospital would become 8 to 12 hours wait times. We're hearing bipartisan support for that, and they're all saying be patient with the process. Let us do our work and toss some ideas around to see what can stick.
HCMC is the state's largest Level 1 trauma center, providing critical care for patients statewide. This makes its financial instability a regional crisis, not just a local one. At the state capitol today, the Minnesota House DFL filing an ethics complaint against Republican Representative Elliot Engen, who was charged with a DWI, and Republican Walter Hudson, who police say was in the car with Engen carrying a legal firearm. We've also learned GOP Speaker Lisa Demuth stripped both Engen and Hudson of their committee assignments for the rest of this session. Demuth hasn't commented on the ethics complaint, but previously said both members behaved unacceptably. Meantime, state lawmakers have a lot of work to do after returning to the Capitol today after a holiday break. Danny Spiewak has a look at the top issues they face with just over a month until the session ends.
On March 26, the last day before holiday break, the House DFL put Republicans on the defensive, forcing them into unexpected votes on bills to restrain ICE and ban assault weapons.
Doing everything we possibly can to pass these gun safety bills.
During the tense 5-hour session, House Republicans voted in unison to block the bills.
This is completely political, theater?
Now, after an 11-day breather, the divided legislature will return Tuesday with 6 weeks remaining in the session. In the tied House, DFL priorities on immigration enforcement and guns have already missed key committee deadlines, although Democratic leaders say they'll continue to push the legislation.
There's going to be a lot of discussions and negotiations on a variety of subjects as we move towards the end of session that will present opportunities for compromise.
This week, for example, House Republicans are holding committee hearings on school safety bills, including Republican Representative Ben Bakeberg's proposal to create a threat assessment pilot project.
Republicans have had proposals on school safety overall, which then translates into community safety. That definitely has bipartisan support.
Also this week, lawmakers will hear bills on expanding the child care tax credit, funding for struggling HCMC, and strengthened oversight of Medicaid enrollment in high-risk programs. In fact, several bipartisan fraud proposals are still alive this session, including upgrades to county IT software and establishing a statewide Office of Inspector General.
We are determined to get an independent Inspector General proposal onto the governor's desk.
Coming out of the holiday break, Senate Democrats plan to put forth their own legislative package in response to Operation Metro Surge, and at some point they'll take a vote on the assault weapons ban. But again, with no movement in the tied House, neither's likely to reach the governor's desk. Right now, the polls are open across Wisconsin, with voters deciding who they want on the state Supreme Court. There's a lot less national attention on this race, as there's no balance of power at play. If conservative Maria Lazar were to win, the liberal advantage on the court would remain 4-3. If liberal Chris Taylor were to win, it would widen that advantages to 5 justices. Liberals have been on a win streak in Supreme Court races, winning the last 3 in Wisconsin. Political scientist Larry Jacobs says the blue wave has caused GOP donors to rethink where they send their money.
Republicans have been on a losing streak for the Wisconsin judicial elections, and there are some donors who have pulled back, wanting to save their money for the fall, where there are going to be some big elections in Wisconsin and other states.
Both candidates in this race currently serve on the State Court of Appeals, and both have promised not to let their political leanings influence their rulings. We are finally seeing the video evidence that completely flipped the script on an ICE shooting in Minneapolis during Operation Metro Surge. The video, released by the city of Minneapolis, shows a confrontation on January 14th between an officer and 2 men that lasts about 12 seconds and that resulted in one officer shooting one of them in the leg. It also shows what did not happen, contradicting initial claims by Homeland Security that the agent was violently attacked by 3 people with a shovel and broom handle for 3 minutes before the shooting. Federal authorities later backpedaled and began investigating the agents who told that story, and now we know why. And now the question is, what will come of the investigation into this shooting? Here's Kent Erdahl.
Nearly 3 months after this North Minneapolis shooting unfolded, the Department of Homeland Security's original news release blaming 3 violent criminal illegal aliens remains posted online. But the official message has changed. A Homeland Security spokesperson confirming that 2 separate ICE officers are now under investigation, adding, quote, lying under oath is a serious federal offense. The U.S. Attorney's Office is actively investigating these false statements.
It's one of the easiest perjury cases I've ever seen.
Robert Weisberg is a professor of criminal law at Stanford and says the shift in tone would be surprising if the video wasn't so clear and public.
This is getting a lot of attention simply because, well, the whole world was watching Minnesota, and the absolute blatancy of the lies. Even this Justice Department, I think, feels quite angry and embarrassed about what the officers did.
But while the officers' statements may have been an outlier, it's hardly the first ICE shooting to come under legal scrutiny.
This is endemic to the culture of that organization and how the boots on the ground are hearing the messages from the bosses about what they should be doing.
Jim Bierman, a former police chief and president of the Future Policing Institute, says while the DOJ has dropped charges against the immigrants involved in the North Minneapolis shooting and 2 others who were shot in Chicago by Border Patrol, he'll be watching to see if the officers are actually prosecuted, especially now that DHS Secretary Kristi Noem and Attorney General Pam Bondi have been removed.
It is in everybody's best interest that the new leadership in these agencies resets the organizational culture in a constitutionally correct manner. And if they don't do that, then this is a bit like rearranging the chairs on the deck of the Titanic. You're still going to have bad outcomes.
This would be an easy thing for the government to do to try to at least mitigate its bad reputation.
But Weisberg says he doesn't believe it changes anything in the cases of Renee Good or Alex Preddy.
There's no real subtlety to this one because unlike the other cases, the video shows that the officers' statements were just flagrantly false.
If these officers are charged and convicted, Professor Weisberg says they could face up to 5 years for making false statements and slightly longer for lying under oath. Even if that happens, he said it's unclear if the officer who shot could face charges related to their use of force. He says that would be a much harder case to prosecute, and he says it's unclear if anyone's even considering it. Heads up to Delta flyers, it's about to cost more to check a bag. Delta just announced it will increase the fee for first and second bags by $10. The third bag fee will go up by $50 for domestic and certain international flights. The new pricing will go into effect on tickets purchased on or after April 9th. Stick with us. There's more news and weather coming up after the break.